Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, July 30th, 2018. We're at that point where it's time for another show, and we're at that point where we realize, hey, I'm not prepared to do another show, but luckily we have Greg Dworkin preparing to do another show off in the background. Democrats are in disarray this morning. I mean, that's always true, but the Democrats in this House are in disarray, and there's only one of us left in this House, and it's not that anybody has switched parties. The Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters has been abandoned. And I'm living in a ghost town. The kids are away, and, wife's away at work and taking a business trip tonight, so it's like, at least the house is quiet. It's as if school were back in session, though it isn't, though that's creeping up on us here in Virginia. We'll be sending the kids back to school once again before Labor Day, which is a bit of a drag for the kids, but they are away, having a nice week of it, I'm sure. At some scout camp experience, and so congratulations to them. And they're at a very wired location for a scout camp. They're enjoying that and texting back and forth and enjoying their electronics in the evening, and that's an unusual experience for scout camp, but I'm sure they're getting a kick out of it, and they're glad to have a week where they have internet access before heading back to school in a couple of weeks. Lots going on here around the world headquarters, but it's quiet at the moment. And so it lulled us into the false sense of complacency that comes with weekends. Oh, I don't have to do it. Wow, we got a radio show to do in about 10 minutes. Let's make sure we get everything in order. All right, we did the best we could for that. It is also, I guess it's the week leading into Netroots Nation, which is exciting for a lot of you who are attending Netroots Nation. Those of us who forget to do things like attend Netroots Nation, well, it's not as exciting for us. It's rather disappointing. I really have to get back in the habit of doing that. And for a while, it was just a matter of there's just too much going on. I guess this week there's not very much going on here at the world headquarters. But next week we'll be back in the swing of things and busy as usual. And that's when, you need to be at home and in place to get prepared for those things. We've got responsibilities to take care of. But for those of you preparing to travel to New Orleans this time, right, for Netroots Nation, congratulations to you. I hope you have a great time. Maybe you'll be able to even listen to the show. You're not too far behind in terms of time. What time zone is New Orleans in? I presumably at least 1 hour behind us, but I know nothing about New Orleans because I've never been. Had I been preparing to go to Netroots Nation, I would know that offhand. Plus, I would be thrilled at being able to join the rest of you. I've never really known what we should do I guess we could put on a big production and do a live show we did that once from Providence in our first year. We did live shows from Providence, and I will tell you that it is difficult to make things sound particularly good live from the convention hall, but it did sound like there was a huge crowd thronging around us and that we were struggling to speak over the crowd. There was a huge crowd there. They were not thronged around us, but that's what the microphones do. It does make for an interesting background sound. And, of course, we did do that time that Armando and I went to the Charlotte Convention in 2012, the Democratic National Convention, and that was sort of interesting, too. It wasn't the same kind of atmosphere, but yeah, I should make allowances for this. I think it maybe started when we started doing West Coast Netroots Nation conventions, and I thought, I can't do a live show in my time slot. I can't be getting up. I'm not getting up at 6 a.m. like Justice does every day to do a show. I'm not that crazy. But we'll figure something out and try and get back in the habit of things today. I do note that I did see one story circulate this morning over at Daily Kos, and every once in a while I really should take a glance at the Daily Kos website because this is Daily Kos Radio. We do things in a little bit independent here, but I did see that circulating this morning was the news that a Washington, D.C. office is opening for Daily Kos, and that sounds like a a fun bit of information to know. I wonder if Greg, do you think we should get studios built for us at the East Coast? Well, you wouldn't be able to make it here from Connecticut in the mornings.
No, but I have to say it was fun remembering when we did that live show from Providence.
Yes, that was a way back.
Armando was with us too.
Yeah. Oh, we had a whole.
In fact,
crew.
Armando was the host.
Yes. Well, he was there. We had. Was Justice at that one? I don't think Justice made it to that one,
No,
but
Wink
we
was
had
there.
Wink and Kelly, and there was a whole crew from Netroots Radio helping make it happen, and I think Justice was turning the knobs remotely to make sure we were actually going out. But yeah, it was a great experience, and Providence was a great experience. Quite honestly, a nice city. I enjoyed it a great deal.
Yeah, very much so. So let me start. We do have kind of a big roundup, and of course we won't get to everything. That's the whole fun about doing this.
Yes,
I send David about like 20 things, and we talk about 6 of them. But that's okay. Gives him information for the show later. I want to start out by doing some local politics, because sometimes local politics is like everything.
All right.
And tells you everything you need to know about national politics. After all, Tip O'Neill is right. All politics is local.
Do we need to know anything? Let's find out.
Yeah. First of all, let's do Connecticut.
That's local.
I'm going to start with this Danbury News Times local paper. Connecticut sees youth surge in voter registration.
Utes.
The Utes are signing up. Most of them are indies. That's okay. The number of young voters who have registered since 2016 has tripled in Connecticut compared to 4 years ago, a sign of how deep the interest has reached in this year's midterms.
Very deep.
More than 43,000 18 to 25-year-olds have registered to vote in Connecticut since Donald Trump was elected president, which is a 210% increase over the same 20-month period after 2012, after Obama was elected.
Okay. Yes.
Connecticut's youth vote surge is due to increased interest in issues such as school safety and immigration, as well as dedicated campaigns to register youth.
School safety, I like that.
And enthusiasm. And recent changes that make registration easier. So most of them, let's see, we've gone, the number of young voters who have registered as Republicans represents a 241% increase over 4 years ago. It's now 5,274. Democrats, 159% increase, but they're up to 12,000. So there's more than twice as many young people voting as Democrats and Republicans, but the vast majority actually are unregistered, not affiliated with any party, 56% of the new voters, which means they won't be able to vote in primaries, but they will be able to vote in the fall.
Yes, they should. I hope they're all making informed decisions about that.
But you get into the habit and then you start getting involved.
Yes.
Okay, so having said that,
you want to observe once or twice. Okay.
Having said that there's new people getting involved in politics, let's now talk about the 5th District, Connecticut, and then we'll do 5th District, Virginia, just for fun.
where nude people are getting involved in politics.
Well,
maybe people.
Theoretical,
okay.
mythical people.
All right,
so,
if you haven't been awake yet.
5th District Democratic debate highlights similarities between Mary Glassman, who I think is first selectman in Glastonbury. That means like the mayor of a small Connecticut town. And Johanna Hayes, woman of color, teacher of the year. And both of them are jockeying to take the place of Elizabeth Esty, Democrat, who had to step down because her chief of staff basically was a domestic abuser, and she did too much to protect him and not enough to get rid of him.
Yeah, so one of those things we care about.
It's a Connecticut district. It's PVI is plus 2D.
Okay. Yes.
Right? It's a relatively close district, in other words. Clinton won like 50-46. It's not overwhelmingly Rhode Island or Hawaii or one of these places where it's like, 70-30. It's actually a very close district. However, the Democrat will have the edge, whoever wins.
All right.
Okay? Mary Glassman, and to put this in perspective, there was a debate here in Newtown yesterday. I didn't get a chance to go to it, but I spoke to people who were there.
Okay.
And read the stories in the paper, and I sent you the Hartford Current report as well.
I have got it.
They are very, very similar in how they would vote and very different in personality and outlook.
Okay.
And in trying to make a determination for myself as to which one of these excellent candidates I would vote for, I'm thinking, it's the difference between Chris Murphy and Richard Blumenthal. They both have the same exact voting record.
Okay.
One's bland and not that exciting, and the other one is.
Okay. That's a thing. It happens.
Right? So, Dick Blumenthal, the enthusiastic, exciting one. No, it's actually the other way around. It turns out Chris Murphy actually recruited Johanna Hayes to run in the first place.
Ah, well, that's telling.
Yeah. And as one of my very astute friends in town said, they're going to vote the same. And this is a longtime member of the Democratic Town Committee here in town. But Johanna, the new person,
yeah.
I mean, if you want to bring new people into politics, maybe you should run some new faces.
Yes, that would be a good idea.
So I'm trying to decide which of these excellent candidates to vote for, knowing it's a win-win, because if whoever I vote for loses and the other one wins, I'm still in very good shape and be happy to vote for either one. But I'm probably going to vote for the lady of color, the teacher.
Okay.
Sentiment there, my mom is a teacher. But also, I like the idea of new people, new faces, and I like the idea of a little excitement and enthusiasm in politics.
Yeah, and we can include that in the
enthusiasm. But that's a dilemma that Democrats all over the country are facing, because go with the old candidate that everybody knows and is solid and safe, or do you get some new blood in?
Yeah, well, it's open for debate, just so long as you actually take a look at things and make a serious choice. There was, sometimes you go the other way and sometimes not, and new faces are always a good idea. There was a discussion I was having this morning. I don't necessarily say, well, let that be the default, and to hell with anybody who's ever done anything. We clearly don't want that.
From this Harvard Current piece, here's just exactly where it falls, and a lot of us are having the same debate. If there's any breathing room between their stances, the story says, it came on the subject of health care. Hayes says she would move toward a system of Medicare for all, adding that health care should be a not-for-profit industry. Mm-hmm. And Hayes offered few details on what that health care system would look like or how it would be sold. There's many nuances and variations of what that would look like, but I know it can happen. We can't go back to what it looked like before the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
Glassman said, I'm for Medicare for all, but I balance 16 budgets and you have to pay for it.
Okay.
Because she's been first selectman in Simsbury for 16 years. Yes. Glassman said she'd push for better access to preventative care because we need to provide something better than sick care, and it was less differences of ideology or policy and more about pedigrees.
I see.
Hayes is a nationally renowned teacher who grew up in the Waterbury Housing Project. Glassman's a long-time elected official and attorney involved in state government. So win-win, different candidates, different ideas to get to the same place.
Okay.
And that's an example of what Connecticut is going through.
All right. Well done, Connecticut.
Right, and win-win. But I think it's important, to stress the idea that a lot of my longtime local politician friends are saying, you know what, how about new blood?
All right. Why not?
Okay. Now we have Virginia 05.
Okay, there's new blood.
And that's an R+6 PVI, so that is not a Democratic-leaning place.
No.
Okay. And there is also a retiring representative, this time a Republican, by the name of Tom Garrett, who you may recall had to resign basically because he was an alcoholic and gave some incredibly drunk rants, which passed for press conferences and embarrassed himself.
You would also be forgiven if you did not remember him at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a figure except for these embarrassing press conferences. Right. So he stepped down, and the Republicans elected a fellow named Denver Riggleman, and I think it was done more by committee than like a primary.
Yeah, or as a joke.
And Denver the Democrat who is going to be running behind is named Leslie Cockburn.
Yes.
Has her own issues because she wrote a very anti-Israel kind of book and has been declared to be anti-Semitic, whether that's true or not. So both of them have baggage. What's Riggleman's baggage? Riggleman apparently is really into Bigfoot porn.
Yes. I mean, he would say no,
Right?
but the answer
so
is yes.
His whole Instagram, which Cockburn, the Democrat, posted yesterday,
Right.
tweeted screenshots from an Instagram account of Denver Riggleman, the Republican nominee, depicting images of Bigfoot naked but censored.
Yes, which has led to a lot of confusion about his name being Cockburn, which I'm trying to clear up for people.
Her name is Cockburn.
Yes,
His
I
name
mean
is
it's not
Riggleman.
it's not the great name, but by the way, Denver Riggleman is not 100% better in this situation. Riggleman, that's weird.
So the Instagram post
Same.
says
Okay.
Bigfoot with a large black bar over its genitals reads cover art for Mating Habits Bigfoot. Almost complete. I had nothing in this magnificent tome. Don't erase the censor box.
I hide nothing. Yeah, what a magnificent tome. And I've been waiting for a tome on, what is it? Bigfoot's mating practices.
Habits. The mating habits of Bigfoot.
Yes. Excellent topic for a book.
Or as Elwood Dowd
Big-
pointed out on Daily Kos today when we were discussing it, yet he persisted.
Oh, no.
So, it's a
What?
bit of a laughing stock here.
A little bit.
Cockburn also points out that Riggleman was the running mate for Corey Stewart,
Yes.
who she says is a white
did not even realize
supremacist.
that.
And she
Yeah.
says that because, by the way, he's a white supremacist.
Ah.
So Riggleman was fine with Stewart, and Stewart is at the top of the ticket in your state because there's no governor race. And so it's going to be a really interesting situation. I mean, this is actually something that the Democrats might actually win this district, although it's an uphill fight because she's not the perfect candidate, and it is a R+6.
Yes.
But if Corey Stewart is your, top of ticket, anything can happen.
I guess that's true. I did read the Daily Progress piece earlier today. I was a little surprised. Well, not really surprised, but I was just amazed watching. I mean, you got to point out the full story, but it reads like the folks over at the Larry Sabato operation. It's like, oh, are we really going to both sides Bigfoot porn? How are we getting to this? Oh, I see. The Cockburn also wrote a book, so there you go. It was a book. His is a book. Same. There, apparently,
or at least it wants to be a book. I'm not sure he actually did the book. But it's just again, all politics is local, and so you've got these. I think we have better candidates in Connecticut 5 than you have in Virginia 5.
Right, local doesn't mean it's any good. It's just
Right.
local.
But it's if you want to get involved and if you want to have people run.
You like Bigfoot.
Then there's something to be said about getting new faces, but sometimes the new faces aren't. Now, to be fair, Denver Riggleman is not a new face. He was Corey Stewart's running mate, and Corey Stewart is not a new face.
No idea even. I live here. I had no idea. I certainly had no idea about the other face, Bigfoot, involved.
Virginia is a very special state.
It is, and this is
I
like
have a
Florida
lot of
man
good friends
level.
who live in Virginia, but obviously the state is different. The northeast part is different than the southeast part, and it's totally different than the western part.
Yeah, I don't even know if Bigfoot is registered.
If it is, it probably is a Republican.
Right. only one party shows up looking like that at the voting booth.
Well, the trouble is, it's really hard to register Bigfoot because he's always blurry.
Yes.
Right.
No fixed address.
Is this really you? Well,
No
it's
pants.
blurry. Well, I'm blurry. So, okay, fine, you're in.
That's true. No photo ID. That's the thing. I'm for voter ID because I don't want Bigfoot's big feet voting. I don't know where.
Bigfoot or big feet.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's like they used to say, in Lord of the Rings, is it proud foot or proud feet?
Right. I think, by the way, did you read the title of his? I know you gave I think the short title of Riggleman's book, but I think the subtitle was, is it discussed in here? Ah, yes. The Mating Habits. Oh, no, maybe he did. Mating Habits of Bigfoot and Why Women Want Him, which is kind of amazing that would even be included. Like, not Bigfoot women. I guess it's his contention that they're, I suppose, Virginian women saying, man, I would like to have sex with Bigfoot, and and I'll also he'll regulate your health care and whether or not you have access to abortion.
Well, it's fair to say I'm done with this story.
Okay. Moving on.
Moving on.
But still, Bigfoot. Yeah.
Bigfoot, after all. What else is big? So CBS News has polling yesterday, which I think was fascinating.
Yes.
Trump backers stand by president in face of Russia criticism, says the CBS poll, which is a terrible headline to a pretty good story.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And let me give you, and I sent over some pictures of the screen caps of polling. It's about a CBS News YouGov battleground tracker.
Okay.
And let's take these couple of questions just to put this in perspective in terms of what it really means. If Russia interferes in the 2018 elections, if they do, is it okay if they help my party or not okay?
Yes.
Well, it's a good question to ask. I mean, it gets really to the heart of just how important this is.
It'll
right?
surprise you.
So the Democrats say it's not okay, 92%, 5% say it's okay if they help my party.
All right.
92.5. But Republicans are 91.7. 91% of Republicans say it's not okay.
Oh.
And only 7% say it's okay if they help my party.
Oh, well.
That's actually a very pleasing, positive kind of result.
I think
this one I think is even more important, though.
All right. It's okay if Bigfoot
asking
helps.
Both Republicans and Democrats.
Yes.
The Russia investigation makes you ...
Oh,
One,
really?
suspect Trump did wrong.
Ow. Yes, he did.
Democrats 73%, Republicans 9%.
I see.
Okay. Russia investigation makes you
okay.
wait to see what the facts show. This is the important one.
Oh.
Republicans 42%.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats 23%.
Oh.
In other words, 96% of Democrats and 51% of Republicans either think Trump did something wrong or they're waiting for the facts.
Oh, okay, I see.
51% of Republicans basically could be influenced, potentially, by the Mueller report if there's major news, if there's major indictments, let's say the Trump family.
They say that. We hope that's true.
What they say. Now, Russia investigation makes you want to defend Trump. 49% of Republicans say that, and that's the headline that CBS News chose to go with. I don't think it's the important one. Half of the Republicans and virtually all of the Democrats are perfectly willing to see where Mueller goes and then make up their mind after that. You can't win with only half of the Republicans saying, I'm going to defend you no matter what.
That is true.
I thought that number was going to be way higher than 49%.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's true. That's a good point. I mean, 49% is a little disheartening when you see it and you're like, well, that half.
It's like
but you have to remember it's not half
of
the country.
Of the voting public. It's not that much.
It's half of Republicans, which is
it's
less than
Nixon
half the
territory.
Country. Yeah.
It's how many people supported him when he resigned.
And we don't know how strongly they want to defend Trump. It makes me want to defend Trump. I just can't do it. Is also in there, I guess.
It depends upon what that report shows.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's true that Trump's hardest, strong supporters will stick with him no matter what. But so what? I mean, that's why we're just so sick of all of this, because there's so many other people out there besides that small cohort, and we've been saying that forever. So guess what?
Should I guess now?
Well, you could, and then I'll tell you.
I'm going to guess Bigfoot. Are you sure?
It was close.
Okay.
Closer, even more mythical than Bigfoot. Okay?
Yes.
This is Lawrence Journal World, presumably Kansas, Senator Jerry Moran.
Yes.
Okay? And even more hard to find and pin down than the mythical Bigfoot is the anti-Trump voter in the Midwest. Because if you read the New York Times, the only thing that exists is Trump voters who still vote for Trump, no matter what.
In the bars and diners.
But this is ljworld.com, Lawrence Journal World. That's the name of the paper, journal-world.
Yes, okay.
It's not Trump World, ljworld.com. Senator Moran faces fervent anti-Trump backlash during his stop in Baldwin City.
Oh, well, that's a famous hotbed of...
U.S. Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas on Friday faced a backlash of criticism against President Trump and his own reluctance to criticize the president, as a number of Douglas County residents asked why he, as a Republican, wasn't doing more to hold Trump accountable for his actions or even help remove the president from office. Last year and a half, we've been going through the circus of crises and self-made messes all over this world, one man in the audience said. I'll ask you as a Republican representative, have you confronted Trump on any of these crazy things? This was greeted by a loud outburst of applause from the estimated 75 to 100 people who turned out for the event. Another man in the audience seemed equally frustrated, combining his frustration with the president, reports of Russian meddling, and his dismay over Moran's own trip to Russia over the July 4th holiday.
Yes. Don't forget
As a member of the party that represents graft, corruption, nepotism, possible treasonous action, and sexual assault, why do you not have a larger voice in any response to the election question? Why do you even believe you had any moral compass speaking to Lavrov because you don't speak against this authoritarian president?
I suspect that person might have come in with a bias.
So
that's okay.
I read this and I sent it to the New York Times. Trip Gabriel, one of the reporters, had talked about defending why they keep talking to Trump people.
That's a good. They need really in a week or so. They need to interview this guy and see if he still feels that way.
That's what I said. So I sent him this article and said, this is what you guys should be doing.
You were smart.
We have a constitutional crisis that's been moving through our system, another man said. The only way out will be least disruptive is for Congress itself to ask the president to resign for the good of the country. Nobody in the audience expressed support for Trump or urged Moran to support his policies.
Wow.
And it was an hour-long event. And Moran kept his composure and insisted he was doing the right thing by doing it behind the scenes, which is fine, but it's quite interesting. And afterward, Moran said he wasn't surprised by the tone. Not in today's environment. There are differences depending upon which community you're in and what part of the state you're in, what the issue of the day is. And the atmosphere is different everywhere. So I'm just saying, if you think these people are just as hard to find as Bigfoot, well, they're a lot less blurry.
That is true. And they are wearing pants. And
New York Times, take notes. Go look for them.
So you don't even have to censor them if you include a picture in them. It's easy journalism. We'll even tell you approximately where they are. Baldwin City, Kansas. Excellent. Google Map it. Thanks, Greg. That's a good one. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us, helping us round things up, and it's a tall order to do an hour about Bigfoot, but Greg has agreed to do it, so take it away, Greg.
Well, I'm waiting on the tapes.
I've set you up. Okay, we don't have to. It's really
right. We can play the tapes on the radio. You know, it's all visual, and we'll just have to describe it for you. So we're going to move on from that. We're going to talk a little bit about news about news.
Okay.
Right. As you may know, Sean Spicer wrote a book.
Yes.
As you may know, it's awful. That's not a surprise. And some of the reviews have been less than kind. But I just have this little segment. Ken Vogel posted this little segment by Eric Wemple, who is the media guy at the Washington Post who watches this stuff.
Okay.
He says, Sean Spicer's book isn't a political memoir, nor is it a work of recent history, nor a tell-all, nor a tell anything. Rather, it's a bumbling attempt to gaslight Americans into doubting what they have seen with their own eyes.
Why are they publishing that? Who's
I don't know.
publishing
Sean Spicer's trying to get a job, I suppose. The review title is Sean Spicer Still Trying to Gaslight America About President Trump.
Weird.
Right. So you can't trust anything that's in the book.
Yeah, that's,
So don't buy it. Don't read it.
That's odd.
And don't hire him.
Yeah. And don't loan him any gum. You didn't want it back anyway, I'm guessing, but...
I'm just saying. All right, Columbia Journalism Review has a couple of stories that they're highlighting, and this all happened on the weekend, so it's good catch-up. The Times meets Trump and Ronan Farrow on the system. Those are the two stories I cover. Now, it turns out that the publisher, the New York Times, A.G. Sulzberger, met with Trump in an off-the-record discussion. Sulzberger says he did it because You wanted to tell Trump it's bad for him to go around saying fake news, and it's bad to say that the journalism is the enemy of the people, and it puts the reporters in the paper and everybody at risk. It was supposed to be off the record. Trump promptly tweeted about it and broke the rules. And so this is like the New York Times in a nutshell, right? We want to play by 1950s rules, and Trump keeps like changing everything. He promised us he wouldn't say anything, and of course he said something immediately and gave his own version of it and didn't give it. So we weren't going to talk about it, but now we have to. So they put out a lengthy statement explaining that the main reason for meeting with Trump was to raise concerns about the president's deeply troubling anti-press rhetoric.
What, like Susan Collins?
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, you guys still don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way things. I guess he's
That
like
was the
Salzburg.
dictator and issued my concerns.
Salzburgers
have
have been meeting
stern
with
letter
presidents.
and delivered to him personally, and that'll change everything.
Yeah, well, good job.
How about you just put on your front page, the president lies.
Yeah.
And you pick your story, because whatever it is, he's lying. That's a guarantee. And then go and interview some people in Kansas. I got some people for you to interview.
Yeah, Baldwin City, dying to be interviewed.
Right. The other big
About
story,
Bigfoot.
of course, is Ronan Farrow talking about less moon views, whatever his name is.
Oh yeah, is it? I don't know how they say that. Moonvies, Moonbeam, Moon,
M-O-N-V-E-S.
Moonies. Yeah.
Chief over at the CBS. He's the chairman. The preview sets the industry on edge, waiting for the story to land, and when it finally did, later that afternoon, Farrow's work proved even more sweeping than most imagined. While allegations by 6 women about Moonves' harassment and assault grabbed headlines, the real brilliance of Farrow's piece is the way it tackles the entrenched culture at a major media organization. He catalogs claims against him and 60 Minutes executive producer Jeff Fager, and writes that 30 current and former CBS employees describe harassment, gender discrimination, or retaliation at the network. Many said that men accused of misconduct were promoted, even after the company was made aware. In response to Farrow's questions, Moonves admitted to making mistakes early in his career, but denied abusing his power, and Fager denied the allegations outright.
Okay, everybody's denying something.
Okay. Charlie Rose was at this network. Aaron Carmen gave a stirring call to action, urging journalists to go beyond reporting on individual behavior. There's a lot going on there. And Fager was sitting in the audience as Carmen spoke about this.
Oh.
So the point about all of this is that you have to go back and remember that the people who are responsible for reporting on Hillary Clinton's campaign were people like Matt Lauer, who wouldn't let her talk when they did an interview and slanted everything in Trump's favor, and people like Moonves and Charlie Rose and other people who themselves turned out to be incredibly misogynist and basically had to leave employment because they got literally caught with their pants down.
It is amazing.
They were the people that were shaping the news, the narrative, as we like to call it.
Yeah. Man, this sucks.
It does.
I don't know what to say.
I mean, and I'm just going to throw in a little political stuff in here, too. Nate Cohen writes in the New York Times, precinct data shows rich white neighborhoods flipping Democratic to 2016, but will it last? The precinct level data, which is far more granular than county level data available immediately after the election, complements a growing body of evidence that's forcing a reevaluation of some of the initial views of the 2016 presidential election. It appears that Mrs. Clinton succeeded, Mrs. Clinton because it's New York Times and they always do that, Mr. Trump, Mrs. Clinton, succeeded at winning over many rich and well-educated Republicans, perhaps by an even wider margin than pre-election polls implied. Okay? Right. Just as Mr. Trump made big gains in the poorest white communities compared to Mr. Romney. But there were more not-so-affluent white voters without a college degree in the battleground states, and Mr. Trump's success was enough to give them the edge in the Electoral College. So in other words, Clinton's strategy actually worked fairly well. Mm-hmm. She was made fun of. Why are you going after these Republicans? You're never going to get them. You're just going to lose. Actually, she did get them. Oh. She lost anyway because Trump turned out to get his voters more. You know, it's similar to what happened to John Kerry in 2004 against Bush in Ohio. Kerry hit his targets. It's just that Bush hit his even better.
Yeah, all right.
Lost Ohio. But it's not like what they did failed. they didn't get enough votes. It failed in that sense. They didn't get the electoral votes, and it failed in that sense.
Yes, well,
But
those are
it
two
wasn't a
big
complete
sensors.
abject failure. Everybody, should say you should never have done. They actually did what they set out to do, and probably better than they even planned themselves. The tactics were fine. The strategy may have been flawed, but the tactics worked actually very, very well.
Well,
When you lose,
yeah, I
you
would
did
like to have
something.
won.
And when you
Would have been better.
lose, that's the way it's interpreted. And
Yes,
it's interesting
that's
that the people who were interpreting it after the fact turn out to be, misogynist and actually people who tend to abuse their position of power in an incredibly sexist way. And they're the ones who are interpreting exactly how this all went down.
It's difficult to grasp that it's happening. I mean, although it's in some ways difficult to grasp. Like it's not immediately obvious to me that all right, well, you harass. You have to think
Watch
about it for a
an
while.
hour interview and it'll be immediately interpreted.
Yes, well, he made it clear. All right, well, I can see that he doesn't like her, but I spent the election period convinced that there were people who didn't like Hillary Clinton, but who also were not harassing women sexually. But I'm running out of options.
Apparently, you were wrong.
Yeah, as it turns out, I didn't initially make the connect. Well, one, we didn't know about all these stories as well, or I should say, the stories weren't as widely disseminated. I think there were lots of people who knew about the stories. Now we've had them break wide, and we're all aware of these things. But I didn't, get this sense that people were like, well, I like to chase women around the office, and so therefore none of them can, no woman can be president. That didn't really strike me as a sensible position. But the problem was, I was not starting from this sort of mentally ill mindset of all women are mine to do with what I want, and so that escaped me for a while, and I'm disturbed to find out this is the truth. I'm deeply concerned, like Susan Collins and the New York Times.
You're troubled.
Yes, right. So, this is a difficult thing
troubling.
to wake up to. Well, one, that this is happening. Two, that it's as widespread as this. And three, that I presumably now all, people are walking around thinking that all men are like this. And I guess to some extent they are. And it's bad news because the rest of us have to wake up to the fact that there are some terrible characters out there.
They're writing books about Bigfoot's mating habits.
Yes, right. and running the news bureaus of the country.
You either harass women or you write,
Right. I mean, he may have taken the better option there. I don't think.
There's no other option.
If Bigfoot never filed charges, I don't know that he was not necessarily. He's a consenting biped, maybe, possibly. I don't know.
Well, the whole story's blurry. Let me finish here with an Andrew Sullivan piece. He's back to writing. He writes for New York Magazine now. Yeah. He doesn't do blogging, but he writes for New York Magazine now. And he has a rather interesting piece here called Portrait of the President as a Con Man.
Oh,
basically, it's a longer story, but makes the case that Trump isn't embarrassed by anything. It's just, and he's not defensive, and he's not embarrassed or trying to hide what he's doing. It's just that this is a con. It's a long con, and the only way he can sustain it is to keep lying and just keep diverting attention. That's why he tweets the way he tweets.
All right.
Right, and it's all got to do with continuing the con.
I see.
And he's doing that yesterday and today still. Okay.
Is he awake?
He's writing. Well, he's writing about Mueller and his border security. His new thing is he wants to shut down the government over the wall. This morning he wrote, "We must have border security, get rid of chain lottery, catch and release, sanctuary cities, go to merit-based immigration, protect ICE, and of course we need the wall." And he's threatened to shut the government down over it, although McConnell and Ryan said, no, that's not happening. And last night was, there's no collusion. The Robert Mueller rigged witch hunt, headed now by 17, increased from 13. Angry Democrats was started by a fraudulent dossier paid for by crooked Hillary and the DNC. Therefore, the witch hunt is an illegal scam. Right?
Trump
and
University.
So why does he keep doing these outrageous things? Because he's got to keep the con going for his own followers.
Okay.
Says Andrew Sullivan. It's got nothing to do with anything except that this is his superpower. He's a con man, and he's really good at it. Right? He says con men usually know that con has a lifespan and not a long one. At some point, It'll collapse because it is, in fact, BS. By then, the best con men have made the sale, think of Trump University, and moved on. They also know that keeping the sucker sealed off from other sources of contrary information is essential until the deal is done. You have to maintain a fiction, relentlessly dismiss or delegitimize external information that might get your marks to think differently, and constantly make the sale. You have to humor and flatter and BS all the time until you've sealed the deal, and Trump is really, really good at this. In fact, it's his chief skill, along with his instinct for the easy mark and another human being's vulnerable spot. It's worked many times before. It's at the root of his entire shady business career. His problem now is that this is the biggest of all cons, and if you're playing at a presidential level, it's also the longest. It has to be sustainable for at least 4 years, and that's a long time to keep it alive. True. That's why it seems to me Trump tweets so often and so aggressively.
The other problem is I don't think he has conned. I don't think he's pulled a con that was a capital crime before. This is a new one.
So he talks about how desperate everything is.
Yes.
But it's not unraveling, but the con is fraying badly, and it's not going to get easier. So, obviously the prediction should be from everybody reading this is, all right, so he's just going to get even more aggressive and even dumber. And he's going to say more and more ridiculous things because, you have to sustain it. Right. And sooner or later, people will turn away.
This is all
not his core, but as we saw in that CBS poll, everybody else, really wants to hear what Mueller has to say before they make up their mind. And that's exactly what Trump does not want.
A very interesting piece. It's also true of Trump. I mean, this is a great confessional for Andrew Sullivan, but it's also a great portrait of Trump.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Okay. Excellent.
So,
I view Sullivan much the same way.
With that, I'm just going to drop this segment and leave you to talk for the rest of the hour and 15 minutes about Bigfoot, if you so desire.
Yes,
I don't.
Of course.
But,
don't think so?
We'll come back on Wednesday and see if you're still on that topic.
Okay.
This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning, reminiscing about old times and new times. And thanks for listening, everybody. And, we'll see where the world takes us this week.
Okay.
It's
Excellent.
still early.
All right. Plenty of time. This is prime Bigfoot hour, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be in every story from now on.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. Bigfoot. He just hung up. Forget it. I have no response to that. No more. You're not going to engage me in this Bigfoot nonsense. Yes, we are, and we're going to do it every day. And that's good news. And tomorrow's Bigfoot pundit roundup will reflect all of the same things. Okay. Well, I'm serious about that. I do regard Andrew Sullivan as very much in the same category in many ways as Donald Trump. But like I said, what puts Donald Trump over the top this time is he's never conned his way into a capital crime before, and treason's one. And I guess, it's the longest of long shots that America at this stage of the game will be willing to charge anybody ever again with treason. Honestly, I would say almost 0% likelihood in the new modern media era. And I don't know whether I've done no academic study of this, but my guess offhand is that it would just be impossible to sustain a charge like treason. I think it applies in many ways, and lots of us do, but applying a charge like treason in an atmosphere where there's, this wide open channel of public communication where you can just come up with the craziest, stupid alternative explanations to, well, I was colluding with another foreign entity, another foreign government, to hand over control of the United States government to that foreign entity. But you can say, no, I wasn't. Or you can, like we were exploring a little while ago, I suppose you could always fall back on the idea of, well, I guess the federal government has grown large and complex enough, and the near imperial powers of the presidency have grown expansive enough that it's, that there's this alternative pleading available to people if they, I guess if you need to fall back on it to save your life because you're actually on trial for a capital crime, you can just say, no, it's within the president's prerogative to pursue closer or even identical, reflexive political identity, even with a foreign government. There's nothing in the Constitution that precludes political union with some other nation state on the grounds of common cultural and historical ties. Those ties don't exist. I know all the white supremacists are hard at work at trying to establish the claim that they do, but they don't. But even so, it would be an unwise and mismatched political union, and unbalanced, and strongly to the detriment of all Americans. But other than that, it's hard to say that it's treason. It's an extraordinarily difficult charge to prove that's true. And, impeachment, removal from office, arrest would be fine. I don't know that it would be very cathartic, but I don't know that we need to actually rest on the fact that it's a capital crime. That has even less chance of happening. Charging someone with treason again, I think, is next to impossible, no matter what they've done. Convicting them would be orders of magnitude more difficult than that. Executing a president of the United States, an ex-president of the United States, for treason, inconceivable. Though it very nearly happened to, I don't know whether they would have executed him or not, but of course, one of our early vice presidents was tried for treason back in the day when there wasn't that mechanism whereby you could bypass all of the press and speak to the vast majority of people in real time in terms they understood. And of course, the presidency wasn't the imperial seat of power that it has become today. It was a much more strictly limited executive, and that was the whole idea. Anyway, I didn't mean to get into all of that necessarily. Let's see. We'll have to poke around and see what else we want to pick up on here. Okay. Well, I've got a comment here from, and I can't tell if it's serious because the words are very big and I can't tell what's going on. But Gideon has this to say. Let us know early on. This is a disgusting comment by Greg, and I don't think it was even about Bigfoot. But if he's going to continue this, I'm going to stop listening to your show. And I don't know whether that's serious or not. So I clicked. It's a comment, Greg, that you made it. It's your fault in the abbreviated pundit roundup. And the comment is Nate Cohen does not equal Nate Silver. P.S. Your fear of polls is pathologic, a marginophorophobia. I don't even know. So you can see I'm having difficulty trying to decide whether this is serious or not. And maybe somebody can straighten this out for me. I have no idea what it means. The only option at this point is to go back to the Bigfoot porn story. I honestly, as much as I would like to, I don't think I could make up any more about it. Although, who knows? I mean, maybe we could weave together a narrative. Naked porn Bigfoot is responsible for loosing Betsy DeVos's yacht, the Sequest, in Huron, Ohio. Can I possibly make a narrative out of this? This may be even beyond my powers here. Here's the story I mentioned at the opening of the show, though. The opening of the D.C. office of Daily Kos. That's very interesting and exciting. And all I can tell you is back when I was young and working for Daily Kos, there was no D.C. office. We didn't have anything. We worked out of our homes, our kitchens, with our kids in the background. And now, these kids, these millennial types with their newfangled offices, etc. Anyway, here's the news. Daily Kos names communications director, opens D.C. office. And you'll never guess who wrote the story. It's the Daily Kos communications director. I think they should have had somebody else write the story for her. But she was very excited about it. It's Carolyn Fiddler, and it's exciting news. And I'll put it to you the way she did, because that's how I do things here on the show. I could have her on, right? She could call in and tell us this, but I have it written right here, and she's busy. She's at the office. She's clearly East Coast. It's almost 10 o'clock. It's time for her to be at work. Today, Daily Kos founder and publisher Markos Moulitsas, you've heard of the guy, announced the naming of Carolyn Fiddler as the organization's first ever communications director. Yeah, I don't think this is a good question. Do I have a boss? Does Daily Kos Radio should be under Daily Kos Communications, don't you think? I don't want it to be. I don't want to have bosses. I want to be my own boss. Also, I don't think they know we do this show. Anyway, the expansion of Fiddler's responsibilities. I better read this. I might have a boss. I could be in trouble. She could be a Bigfoot fan for all I know. And I'm burying myself. This is unfair. The expansion of Fiddler's responsibilities highlights Daily Kos's rapid growth and underscores the organization's growing impact on races at every level of the ballot in 2018 and beyond. And I think I agree with that. Further, I think I have to. Further, the opening of Daily Kos's Washington, D.C. office, which to my knowledge has no recording studio in it to date, though they did build a recording studio in the West Coast office in Berkeley. And I would push for this as a giant leap forward for Daily Kos Radio's professionalism, except it is not easy to commute into Washington, D.C. ever from anywhere, not least from where I am. I did it for a long time. I'm sorry I tried, and really the Daily Kos offices in Washington should, if I had my way, would be here in Virginia, and maybe even in my house. For a long time they were. So, it's a possibility. It's not off the table as far as I say. Anyway, so I'd like to find out where the office is. I don't think the address is in here. That may be a security thing. Also, the office might not be all that glamorous. I don't know. I'd like to go and see it, though. That's for sure. But the opening of a Daily Kos Washington, D.C. office gives the company a bi-coastal footprint, a big footprint, you might say, and will augment its immense and growing impact. This is terrific. On elections this cycle. Daily Kos has raised more than $5.7 million for campaigns and candidates. And by the way, I'm happy to report that number to you. A lot of that is your money, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of you have been very active in supporting those campaigns. I encourage you to keep doing it. It makes us look good. It makes you look good. It makes good candidates win. And occasionally, the job's not over. You got to go back and call them, our offices, and twist their arms just like any politician. Don't forget that. The future of progressive politics in the United States is at a crossroads, and the continued growth of Daily Kos puts us on the cutting edge of the effort to position Democrats for success in 2018 and beyond, said Mulitsas. That sounds like something he might write. He might read it aloud. Do you think that sounds like his discussion tone? From our growing online presence and activist engagement to our landmark civics polling operation. Yes, very true. Underreported story there. But actually, by the way, many of the most amazing and fantastical advances that Daily Kos, I think, has been behind in the political arena have been sort of these actually quiet, like niche accomplishments in the tech side of polling and political analysis, like over the Daily Kos elections vertical. It's really been, they've done some amazing work. We did some nice things about the filibuster once, too. Anyway, the civics polling operation, a crucial partnerships as well with other key progressive groups. Daily Kos's story, 16 years in the making, 6 of it, I think, on the air here, right, is an integral component of the Democratic political landscape. Fiddler's communications experience and her unparalleled expertise in state house politics, and that is her rather amazing background there, will empower our organization to further expand our impact on races from the top to the bottom of the ballot. And we shouldn't refer to them as the bottom of the ballot. They're very important to us, and that's a great pick, in my opinion, because it's difficult to find like top level, nationally interested and interesting operatives who are trained to and are willing to give the proper attention to state and local elections. I mean, I think everybody probably listening to the show is convinced of the necessity of doing that, but we all naturally gravitate, or most of us naturally gravitate towards the national level, the stories to discuss. We're always, surprised and interested and willing to discuss and thrilled with ourselves for living up to the, our stated understanding of the value and importance of local elections when we get to discuss such a story. But she's like genuinely A, up to speed on all of them, and B, genuinely interested in it and genuinely has a passion for it. And that's going to serve us extraordinarily well. There's more to the story, which she had to write about herself, her first assignment, I guess, in the new job. Daily Kos's impact on elections this cycle is already shattering records, thanks to our community's landmark engagement in Democratic campaigns. Militz's continued. It sounds like Marcos wrote a good part of this article, too, unless it was her job to write his statement. Fiddler's expanded role will put our tools and resources in the hands of an even greater audience and further amplify the force we exert in American politics. Daily Kos, D.C., located downtown, far away from me, anchors the organization's political presence in Washington. Some would say I anchor it, but I don't. Fiddler will continue to be part of the legendary Daily Kos elections team through November as it continues to expand its coverage of and impact on key races across the country. A little background here, too. Fiddler initially joined Daily Kos in June of 2017 after working in state politics for the better part of a decade, most recently as National Communications Director at the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. That's where her most relevant experience, I think, comes from in terms of getting us focused where we got to be. Then there's a lot of very good things to read about her background and where she came from and how she came up in politics and in education, and you should all fill yourselves in on that. And then you find out at some point that she is from a small town in Virginia you've never heard of, she insists, and her comic book collection is probably bigger than yours. And that brings us back to Bigfoot and small towns in Virginia and other things that are bigger than yours. And now's a good time to take a break before we get in too much trouble. I don't know how she feels about Bigfoot, but I know she's enjoying that story this morning anyway. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, brought to you by and endorsed by the Daily Kos Communications Department. I don't know. What happens if we're eliminated? I don't know if that's... everybody has to write in and pressure. I don't know. I am not at all certain that that anybody is, besides Joan, is aware that we do the show there. Occasionally, from time to time, we talk about things. I don't think it's on anybody's radar, and probably we should keep it that way. Let's see. Comments that have come in over the past couple of hours. Rebecca Roman's enjoying the fact that we got, you got politics in my porn here. That's, everybody loves the Bigfoot story. D. Gordon Liddy, Ideologue on Twitter. You either harass women or write Bigfoot porn. I guess that's, you don't mean me personally, right? That's just sort of generally... as a Republican candidate, you're either harassing women or maybe, I guess, even as a network news anchor, even for the morning shows, as it turns out, you're either harassing women or writing Bigfoot porn. Let's see. Culture of Truth. Oh, yes, agreeing. Oh, thank you, with the assessment on Andrew Sullivan. If anyone would know about the long con, it's Fifth Column Sullivan. I feel the same way. And the mighty OCD. Good morning. Listening live today. I know he's a big podcast fan as well. I dropped a class in college, he says, when I found out the professor was a big-time Bigfoot enthusiast. Wow. To be fair, he also mispronounced Peloponnesian War. I hope I pronounced that right. And that would be problematic for me as a professor. But I mispronounced professor just a second ago, so I don't know if I even get to... Oh, yeah. Peloponnesian. That's the same pronunciation I have, Cindy. So, all right. We'll go with that one. So a Bigfoot enthusiast did he mispronounce? Are we mispronouncing Bigfoot? Is it Bigfoot by some chance? I've always thought that it was about his having big feet, but maybe it's a foreign language derivation I don't know about. What language does a Bigfoot speak? Maybe that sounds Canadian. Maybe that's it. Bigfoot. You mean Bigfoot? Yeah. Sure. All right. Well, they mispronounce lots of things and misspell favorite and all those sorts of things. But we love them nonetheless. Okay, well, let's see. So lots to find out about Carolyn. Congratulations there. It really kind of would be interesting if we were integrated into some sort of organization. But I guess better that we just be left alone because it's always a headache dealing with anybody who's got anything to say about the way you do your radio show. If there were any rules about how we did this thing, I'd never get it off the ground. Okay. Let's see. What other stories have we got? By the way, yes, that's what Bigfoot said. Ha ha. Very funny. Never get it off the ground. You people. All right. What have we pocketed for the week? And by the way, I see Armando listening along as well and made a comment earlier in the show, generally speaking, about how I'm sure Greg was wrong, but only in the vaguest sense. And it was an interesting comment. I'll round it up among the others. And it's true. You know what impact Mueller will have, the Mueller investigation. If this was the New York Times or Vox, I could go through a long explainer about who Mueller is. Robert S. Mueller III, former director of the FBI, currently special counsel in charge of, the deal. But you know what impact he'll have? And the answer is you'll know when Mueller does it, not before. And that's a good point that needs to be reiterated about the way he operates and everything. We don't get a lot of leaks. It doesn't happen very often. All right, let's see. Where were we here? A couple of things that Greg passed on as well. Are these new to the... let's see, I got to click back into the right category here. Something that he sent us after exiting the show, Christina Wilkie on Twitter. Let's see. New, Giuliani just moved the goalposts in two big ways on Fox and CNN. Yes, I did see this. Lots of people talking about it. He went on the Fox and Friends, I guess, show in the morning to say, well, I've been sitting here looking at the federal code. And he wasn't. I mean, he says, I've been sitting here looking at the federal code. There's no books or anything. He's not looking at anything. Been sitting here looking at the federal code, and I've been looking for the crime of collusion. And guess what? It doesn't exist. Collusion is not a crime, he says. So he's no longer claiming that Trump didn't collude with Russia. He's just claiming that collusion is not a crime. And, of course, secondly, he's not saying Trump did not know about the 2016 Russia meeting in advance, the collusion meeting, as a matter of fact, that took place with his son, Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort, Natalia Veselnitskaya, etc., in Mos Eisley Trump Tower space station. He's not saying Trump didn't know about this meeting in advance. He's saying he didn't attend it. I don't think anybody has accused him of attending it, but, he probably had no pants on, so he didn't bother leaving his cave. All right, so let's see. There's that, and what else did Greg send us here? A photo. A screenshot here. What are we looking at? Greg's tweet of, look at that. There we are. Now that explains it, right? What is the word for fear of polling? And then he's trying to check on new words here. Cross-tabophobia. But we have an answer here. Ariel Edwards Levy. How does she say it? It's not complicated. Levy. Says margin of terror. Okay. I will accept that as the fear of polling. True. But I think, I don't know if that satisfies Gideon. We'll have to find out. You can certainly let us know, Gideon, and we'll pass on your sentiments. All right, let's see. Other stories. I don't think we even got to any of the ones in pocket just yet. Well, there's an awful lot out there. What do we want to make our focus here in the second hour? Let's add this to the growing pile of evidence. And, I do have something about evidence, too. That's right. I shouldn't forget that. This is from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Fits into our growing file, let's say, about the expanding relationships between, like, this transnational white supremacist movement that we suppose may one day find it advantageous to reveal itself as a genuinely transnational, pan-national unification effort of, I don't know what, northern white authoritarian regimes. We're gonna, I don't know. I don't know how to put it. Let's see. This from just a little while ago, a few days ago, July 19th, the Southern Poverty Law Center put out Weekend Read, and we missed that particular weekend, but we'll read it a week and a half later. White nationalists who shouted, "Russia is our friend," weren't just whistling Dixie. Remember that happened actually as I recall, part of the Charlottesville situation. I think that's where that first came up, although, there are certainly other instances elsewhere, and we've seen it a lot since. Let's take a look at this. The same day President Trump appeared to side with Vladimir Putin over U.S. intelligence agencies in Helsinki, remember that? That same day, the Justice Department unsealed a criminal complaint accusing a woman named Maria Butina of acting as an agent of a foreign government, that, of course, being Russia. And the story continues here. Rubbing shoulders with right-wing figures at the National Prayer Breakfast, another subject that blew up over the weekend, and one of the major news outlets has done a big focus on that. And so congratulations there to Jeff Charlotte for having this story break wide, although I have no idea whether they gave him the requisite credit for it, but we'll do it. Rubbing shoulders with right-wing figures at the National Prayer Breakfast, Butina allegedly sought to establish a back channel of communication, just like Jared Kushner was after. Wow, that's weird. What a coincidence. With American politicians who share Russia's anti-LGBT stance. And remember, that was the reason we weren't supposed to be having the Olympics there. That was the reason we shouldn't have been having the World Cup there. And yet, both of those things were had there. How odd. She's not the only one who saw an opportunity, though. The most recent National Prayer Breakfast this year was attended by more than 50 Russians. And there are such strong cultural ties between American Protestant, evangelical, Pentecostal, what other things can we throw in there? Right-wing conservatism and Russian Orthodox Church. There are so many obvious parallels. The gigantic beards are just becoming one of them, actually. That's another one of those weird trends. Let's see. The enormous priestly headdresses haven't caught on to this point. Onion domes, not hugely popular in the American South. And quite frankly, honestly, if you show... Here's the thing. How many people... It's quite iconic, of course. And I suppose if you show... At this point, it's been many years of exposure to it on TV, but if you showed the St. Basil's... Did I say Basel or Basil? Probably Basel. St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow to people. A lot of people would, I think, be able to identify that as Russia. But I'm curious, if it wasn't so famous... and so famously associated with, Red Square, which I guess they still call it Red Square. You'd think they'd rename that post-communist. But all right. Anyway, I mean, the bricks are red, too, and the Kremlin there. So I suppose there's no getting away from it. But I'm curious how many Trump supporters, unprompted, shown a picture either of that famously onion-domed cathedral or some other, I suppose equally grandiose Russian Orthodox church with those same domes. I'm curious how many of them would initially guess that was a mosque that, needed to be targeted and destroyed. Or if you showed them even a picture of the cathedral itself, St. Basil's, and said, they're going to build this in Memphis. Would people say, "Oh my God, I told you those Muslims, they'll never stop"? I'm curious about that. Which just, is sort of a backhanded way of underlining the fact that there are almost really no cultural or ethnic ties here of any vintage recent enough to matter. I mean, there may have been some sort of Dark Ages or even prehistorical connection, but I doubt there's very much more. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong, and all of the weirdo psycho theorists out there are correct after all, and we're just bringing up the rear and all the academic study of white supremacy. Anyway, it turns out that anti-LGBT politics, to get back to organized thoughts, are an effective tool in mobilizing religious nationalists everywhere. And that's the common thread that they're really talking about here. That by Catherine Stewart in an op-ed for the New York Times last week. Probably should have read that one. Did I put that one aside? Let's just click on it and see if, yes, well, that was from the What Was Maria Butina Doing at the National Prayer Breakfast story, which I may or may not have put aside for reading, but now I've got it. Anyway, so it's not just religious nationalists, by the way. Take white nationalist Richard Spencer or longtime Klan leader David Duke, for example. According to Anton Chekovstov, depending on how you read that, the author of Russia and the Western Far Right, Tango Noir, I would have read it up until the subtitle there, both have long-standing relations with their Russian fascist counterparts. Certainly both have ties to Alexander Dugin, the former advisor to Russia's foreign intelligence chief and ultranationalist who hailed the election of Trump. And remember, we spoke a little bit about him the other day, too. As Tom Porter recounted in a piece for Newsweek after the deadly white supremacist rally in Charlottesville last summer, Duke and Dugin were photographed together on at least one occasion and are linked by neo-Nazi Preston Wigginton, another real name, Preston Wigginton, who reportedly sublets Duke's apartment in Moscow. Did you even know Duke had an apartment in Moscow? Dugin has also contributed to altright.com, Richard Spencer's website, as well as Radix, R-A-D-I-X, journal, Spencer's online journal. Easy to do since Spencer's ex-wife is also Dugin's translator. Yes, don't forget that. She's Russian. He has additional ties to anti-government conspiracy theorist Alex Jones and white nationalist leader Matthew Heimbach, whose name we've called at least once on the show, as I recall. The love affair between Russian and American extremists isn't limited to individual relationships. Literally. Whole cultural exchanges are taking place between white nationalists in both countries, borne along by a current of swastikas, the Nazi Black Sun, and references to 88, which is, of course, code for Heil Hitler, or 14, code for the 14-word white supremacist mantra. Brian Schatz found all of these in spades when he began investigating the proliferation of neo-Nazi affiliated mixed martial arts outfits on both sides of the Atlantic. Not surprising there either. And remember, if you've been listening since the very beginning, I recall doing a show in which we read about a mixed martial arts ministry, I don't think it was identified at the time as overtly either, white supremacist or neo-Nazi, but it was an odd sort of a fit. Even then, something raised a red flag about a right-wing, conservative-leaning, or if not outright right-wing and conservative, religious, evangelical ministry based in mixed martial arts and ultimate fighting. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that it was the very same place or someplace quite like it. Anyway, that's an interesting thread to tug at. In a piece for Mother Jones, it is linked here. Just, maybe that's it. This one is The Terrifying Rise of Alt-Right Fight Clubs. This one I don't believe we actually read, but I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up leading back to it. We may have to explore that and change directions for a little bit of time. But anyway, in a piece for Mother Jones, Schatz traced the way American white nationalists, quote, generally seem to worship, unquote, White Rex, a Russian clothing company and former fight promoter, which has in turn borrowed from American racism with events like its Birth of a Nation Fight Night. I feel privileged not to have heard of most of this stuff, but I feel like it might be dangerous to continue in my ignorance. The bonds between Trump-adoring American extremists and Russia are cultural, political, and apparently strong. It's increasingly clear that the white nationalists who shouted, "Russia is our friend," in Charlottesville last summer weren't just, as they wink at us, say, Whistling Dixie. Now that's it, and signed by the editors of the SLPC blog, I guess. And P.S. Here are some other pieces we think are valuable, and they are these. Although, are they? I don't know if that's just one of those randomly generated, like, well, you read this story, so you might also like these. I think that's what it's phrased differently. So I think they fooled me there. Good job on your marketing copy. All right. Well, let's see. That's surprising, and like I said, it might be a thread that we want to tug at. But first, I divert back to the New York Times article that got a considerable amount of attention about the prayer breakfast stuff, and maybe we can read that alongside the opinion piece that was flagged in our last read. This, though, in the news section. At prayer breakfast, guests seek access to a different, higher power. Get it? Wink, wink. And Ken Vogel, Elizabeth Diaz on this piece here from the end of last week, with a lineup of prayer meetings, humanitarian forums, and religious panels. The National Prayer Breakfast has long brought together people from all over the world for an agenda built around the teachings of Jesus. Although maybe Charlotte would differ a little bit in that. But there on the guest list in recent years was Maria Butina, looking to meet high-level American officials and advance the interests of the Russian state, and Yulia Tymoshenko, a Ukrainian opposition leader, seeking a few minutes with President Trump to burnish her credentials as a presidential prospect back home. I think, is that the woman with the very oddly braided blonde locks piled on top of her head? Could be. I think it actually is. Their presence at the breakfast illuminates the way the annual event has become an international influence peddling bazaar, where foreign dignitaries, religious leaders, diplomats, and lobbyists jockey for access to the highest reaches of American power. And I'm getting the sense, between this and my earlier skim of the article, that the gist of this is that the idea that somehow the National Prayer Breakfast has been perverted in its purpose along the way. However, Jeff Charlotte would tell you, no, that was actually the original and intended purpose. I just think that's difficult for most people to believe, just simply because we've spent so long thinking the National Prayer Breakfast sounds so benign. And after all, Dwight Eisenhower went to one, so how bad could it be? And I think we've all just been perhaps fooling ourselves, except for Jeff Charlotte. Anyway, let's continue. The subculture around the breakfast was thrust into the spotlight last week with the indictment of Ms. Butina, who was charged with conspiring to act as a Russian agent. Her goals, prosecutor said, included gaining access to the breakfast to establish a back channel of communication between influential Russians and Americans to promote the political interests of the Russian Federation, not political union with the Russian Federation specifically speaking, although I suppose that could be considered to be in the interests of the Russian Federation. That would be up to them to decide, don't you think? It creates problems for us along the way, but anyway, Ms. Butina's spy thriller-like tactics hint at the more widespread, if less sensational, international maneuvering that pervades the prayer breakfast and the lucrative opportunities it creates for Washington's core of lobbyists and fixers, according to more than half a dozen people who have been involved in peddling access around the event. And I'll just pause here again to remind you of one of my working theories about this, largely inspired, of course, almost exclusively inspired, I'd say, I guess, by Jeff Charlotte's work on this subject, but, colored by a number of other things. If you wanted to build an operation that was really, just legitimately aimed at doing all the sorts of things that lobbyists wish they could be doing, unregulated, unobserved, etc., and outright influence peddling, outright bribery, whatever it is, you couldn't do any better than to do it under the banner of something, one, as benign sounding as the National Prayer Breakfast, and two, something that you could, to the extent that people regard the National Prayer Breakfast as being about prayer, it would be extraordinarily difficult to penetrate the inner workings, to get in behind the closed doors, to expose, and even if you did, to expose it to light without exposing yourself to criticism of being somehow either anti-religious or, God forbid, anti-Christian. You'll never get out from underneath that among conservatives in the country. But, you'll find, of course, that there will be, moderate, centrist Democrats who will happily sign on to the idea that it's somehow un-American and unconstitutional and illegal to pry into what are, after all, the religious practices of these folks. And they may actually believe it, like you said, but they're not practicing religion. They're not necessarily actually praying at this breakfast, though I'm sure at some point they put on a prayer so that everybody will continue to regard it as a prayer breakfast. But if they're gathering either in a church or if they're gathering somewhere and asserting that they're praying together, but what they're doing is actually handing out bribes and colluding with one another, but in closed doors, and then when you point it out, you can say, well, if you get caught red-handed, you just say, well, it's no secret that we're into the prosperity gospel. That's a legitimate thing, the prosperity gospel. You may not agree with it, but that's not up to you. We have religious freedom in this country, and if you want to believe that people who enjoy success in this country are ordained by God and that Jesus wants us to be rich, well, that's just your right in our system of freedom of religion, and how dare you suggest otherwise? They afford themselves an awful lot of freedom in their quest to reduce other people's freedoms. We know about the hypocrisy there, but it's great cover. I really and truly mean it. Why not, if you wanted to conduct a sex trafficking, I was just going to say, if you wanted to do a sex trafficking operation inside of a church, and then I realized, of course, I'm probably not the first one to come up with that idea, and a lot of people would tell you that's what they were doing in some cases, and I think you know which cases I'm talking about. But religion, it makes for great cover in this country, and people are very reluctant to pull back the veil and pry into the affairs of something that goes on in what's supposed to be a religious context. And I believe, having read, some of what Jeff Charlotte has put out on the subject, that they might really consciously have chosen this avenue partly for that reason. Partly they were in fact crazy evangelicals and really believed in it, and maybe that's helpful, especially now post Hobby Lobby, where pretty much anything can be declared to be a sincerely held religious belief, unless it's not Christian overtly, in which case you're sunk. It doesn't matter whether you need this or that practice. If you are Muslim, or probably even, honestly, at this point, Jewish, forget it if you are practicing some sort of Native American religion. That's just mumbo jumbo. We're talking about real religions, of course they would say. And now they say that about Islam as well. That's not real religion, it's a cult, say the members of Trump cult. Anyway, I don't want to discourage myself so much that I don't read the rest of this article and share it with you. Ahead of Mr. Trump's first appearance at the breakfast last year, some of the people said foreign politicians clamored for tickets, with some offering to pay steep fees, i.e. bribes, to get into the event and the myriad gatherings on its sidelines. Bribery is not the same thing as ticket scalping, unless, of course, it's the idea of creating a ticketed event in the first place. But okay, fine. Call it a political fundraiser. Except, of course, those are supposed to be transparent, and here where there's no transparency. But hey, since Citizens United, what's the difference anyway? And also, corporations are people. You can see we're getting into a lot of problems here. And now, of course, the time has just about arrived for us to take our third break. So let's wind something up with a nice paragraph or two here out of the story and take a little pause. We'll play our music. See you after the break. So there's the ticket scalping going on. And here, look, one lobbyist, Herman J. Cohen. Everyone knows Herman. Herman J. Cohen offered what he billed as an exclusive invitation to last year's breakfast and 3 days of meetings around it to an African leader for $220,000. So it's pretty much what goes on at one of the national conventions, any one of the two national conventions, of course. This sort of thing goes on all the time. But an added twist, you don't have to be from this country. Wow. Well, anyway, we'll find out which African leader that was and what came of it after this break when we continue with the story on the other side. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I have no spiel in the first break, but the usual in the second, by the way, thanks to Scott. Okay. I guess programming note there. We'll discuss this after the show, guys. To Justice Scott, I think that's probably the result of our first stab at switching about the breaks. So no good deed goes unpunished. You thought you'd shake things up. And, of course, any transition, just like loading and unloading your pistol before entering a no-gun zone or a gun-free zone, that's an invitation for mistakes, right? So, okay, we'll get that right. Too bad. Okay, I probably just should not have read that on the air, and then everything would have been fine. Where did I leave off? Yes, National Prayer Breakfast and the terribleness that surrounds it. Of course, I got distracted during the break with sidebar editors' picks from the New York Times, and bad news. The rest of the world outside politics isn't doing any better. People are getting paid enormous amounts of money for very, very dumb things, and it's very difficult to keep people getting up in the morning and going to work when you find out that that's the case. You got to put that stuff aside. All right, where were we? Yes, Herman Cohen sold an exclusive invitation to last year's breakfast and 3 days of meetings around it to an African leader for $220,000. It's a big ticket price. Several contacts will be made with American authorities for official meetings with you as the president of Chad and president in office of the African Union, Mr. Cohen promised in a proposal, calling the breakfast a special occasion to get to know and converse directly with the president of the U.S. Interesting. The letter, by the way, written in French, well done there, sent to President Idriss Déby, how do you pronounce it, D-E-B-Y in French there with the accent mark, of Chad in December of 2016 and later obtained by the New York Times. So just for a second here, if we could, I'm glad he wrote to him in French. That was wise. He's selling a ticket to the National Prayer Breakfast and a bunch of meetings at which he'll have contacts with lots of American authorities for official meetings. The president of Chad. Now, if I remember correctly, let's use the Google machine. And let's see. What was the timing of, and maybe this article, if I just read on, will explain the timing to me, and you must be thinking the same thing too, about that time Chad was otherwise, I think, inexplicably listed on the travel ban list. And I'm wondering whether Chad was on the travel ban list during the time when Herman J. Cohen here was looking to sell for $220,000 access for the president of Chad to American officials, and whether that would be considered ordinarily. If the travel ban list had been a legitimate list that reflected some sort of legitimate worry about international terrorism and state-sponsored terrorism, maybe that wouldn't have been a very smart idea security-wise, but it was a brilliant idea business-wise. Like, wouldn't you like to get off of the travel ban list for $220,000? You can talk to the people who control the list, and maybe things change for you. just looking back at the old news here, the travel ban on Chad is reported here as lifted in this April 11th, 2018 story. U.S. President Donald Trump has lifted the controversial travel ban his administration imposed on Chad about 6 months ago. That would put it in like November of 2017. But this prayer breakfast was in 2016. Maybe he came and made a bad showing at the prayer breakfast and got himself put on the travel ban list. I don't know. Or maybe, this would be now here's a good scam, right? I don't know that this happened. We'll go read the actual article, but I just invented a great scam, right? Okay. I'll write you a letter in French offering for $220,000 to sell you an exclusive ticket to the National Prayer Breakfast, which will afford you unfettered and unmonitored, because religion, access to American officials to lobby for whatever freaking cause you have there in Chad. I don't know anything about you. And okay, fine, I would like that. That would be a great thing. Isn't that bribery in your country? Doesn't that cause problems? Yes, but you're from Chad. You can escape the jurisdiction. You're here on a diplomatic passport. We're not going to extradite you from Chad. Don't worry about it. That's our problem. And besides which, if the president does it, it's not illegal. That's the way we handle things in this country. But is the president going to be there? That I don't know. But if you're white and important, there's nothing illegal in this country. So don't worry about it. Okay, fine. Just transfer me the $220,000. This all, and if it takes place over email, how ironic that over there in Africa, they're like, I just got an email from somebody in America who said I needed to wire him $220,000 and I would get access to untold riches. And it worked. But my scam is this. What about if you send the $220,000 and then say, great, send me the tickets. And instead of sending you the tickets, I can't send you the tickets because I also sold them to the president of Libya. And so I'm in a bind and I no longer have the tickets. One great solution would be now everyone from Chad is banned from traveling to the United States. So, I'm sorry. I have the tickets for you at will call. Just come pick them up. But you can't get into the country because travel ban, and all's well because I collected another I'm sorry, the $220,000 is non-refundable. Besides which, I don't see why I should give you a refund. Just come and pick up the tickets. Well, you didn't, so I gave them away to the guy from Libya. Also for $220,000. Wink, wink. I don't know if that happened, but it probably did or should have. And in the movie that I write about this, it will happen. Several contacts will be made, as they said in the pitch, with American authorities for official meetings. And don't forget, official meetings is the pitch in this letter, obtained by the New York Times and reprinted below. Mr. Cohen, a former Assistant Secretary of State under President George H.W. Bush, so he'd be in a position to say such things, said that Mr. Davey did not take up the offer. So I don't know whether that means he didn't send me $220,000 or he did, but he didn't pick up his tickets. Just saying. But he said that lobbyists have long brokered access to the breakfast. People have done it for years. What about ism? What about this one? What about that one? Yeah, but I caught you. Anyway, he said lobbyists have long brokered access to the breakfast and opportunities surrounding it for their foreign clients, often as part of a larger package of services. I didn't sell him the tickets. I am his consultant. He's paying me $220,000 to do political consulting for him here in the United States. And as a courtesy, I also gave him these tickets that I happened to cross. And that sort of thing happens with lobbyists and consultants all the time. What other services did you provide for him? None that I remember, but I might, the point is he had my phone number and he could have called and asked for something else. When I came into this business, it had been going on for many years, Mr. Cohen said, and so therefore I'm not guilty, I guess, is the underlying implication. It's an opportunity, Mr. Cohen said at the event. And by the way, is there a lot of prayer that's relevant to Mr. Cohen, you think, going on at the National Prayer Breakfast? Just wondering. If I go to the prayer breakfast, I have a good chance of maybe shaking the president's hand or talking to him for 2 minutes. It's a downside for me, but some people like it. In a way, it bypasses protocols, he said. He added. He's saying the quiet part out loud here. But in a way, it is taking advantage of people being present at the same venue. See, we're not bypassing protocols. We're just making people be present at the same venue in contravention to protocol. But it's not bypassing. It just happens. I mean, I really, this is what makes me suspect that that Jeff's right, that this has always been the intention of the breakfast, and it hasn't morphed into anything. It just was this thing, and now we know it. Such invitations to foreign leaders, Cohen said, are very useful to them back home. Not useful enough for the president of Chad to take them up on it, apparently, but I'm sure they're useful to somebody with money. James C. Slattery, a former Democratic congressman from Kansas, whose firm was paid more than $1.8 million since 2011 to provide lobbying help for Ms. Tymoshenko, the Ukrainian leader, and her political causes, encouraged her to attend the breakfast. He accompanied her to last year's event, where she secured a photograph and a brief conversation with Mr. Trump, which her allies used to promote her nascent presidential candidacy back home, to the apparent surprise of the White House. I doubt it. Or maybe, yes. They were surprised. What? That hot lady is a politician? Anyway, and also, by the way, to the chagrin of the sitting Ukrainian president, who had to knuckle under not long ago and refused to cooperate with Mueller in exchange for getting some missiles. You remember that story? Held every year at the Washington Hilton, the prayer breakfast festivities span several days during the first week of February, with the American president appearing at a ceremonial breakfast on Thursday. So you can already tell it's a misnomer. National Prayer Breakfast. How long does breakfast last? A couple of days. Wow. That, breakfast, they say, is the most important meal of the day, and no way to prove that better than to eat breakfast for 4 days solid while you're praying. Don't pray with your mouth full. I don't know how much praying and breakfasting can be going on at the same time, but I think most people's impression of the National Prayer Breakfast is that part at which the president attends, and you're like, okay, that's a normal thing. Breakfast, it lasts half an hour. The fact that they pray there is their own business, and we pay no more attention to it. It's great, great cover. The days are packed with programming and child trafficking, possibly. I'm just saying there's room for it in their agenda. After which guests head to private suites, which would never have anything to do with child trafficking, with names like the Africa Room and the Middle East Room, because everybody has certain particular regional interests or tastes in trafficked children. I don't know which. They also go to fancier hotels in nearby Georgetown, if you're extra rich, where they mingle late into the night. And you know how things go when you're mingling late into the night. You pray or share business cards, as it says here, and sometimes draining expensive bottles of cognac, which is also part of what you do when you pray or traffic. A favorite activity is an annual midnight tour of the Capitol hosted by a former congressman. And none of them are into children. Oh, this is terrible. Anyway, some describe the gathering, and I'm not even telling... You know what? Honestly, this is not being reported here, and it may not even be true, but I gotta tell you, it fits very well, is all I'm saying. And in this day and age, isn't it fair to simply say, I've seen no proof that that's not the case? Some describe the gathering as similar to the World Economic Forum, which it may be. I don't know what they're doing there. Except that Jesus is the organizing principle. Except it's really not, or he's really not. It's some perverted version of, what did they say? Totalitarianism for Christ in Jeff Charlotte's formulation of, or Jeff Charlotte's retelling of their own formulation of it, I should say. The eclectic guest list has included the Dalai Lama, the Reverend Billy Graham, Mother Teresa, the singer Bono, and the former Redskins head coach Joe Gibbs. And, of course, I forgot to say breadsticks, which is my usual substitute term for the racist term Redskins. As well as the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. And it is an interesting collection. And again, itself great cover. What does the Dalai Lama know about? It's prayer. I'm into prayer. Breakfast. From time to time, though I'm also known to skip meals for extended periods of time, as are, I'm sure, Mother Teresa and I don't know who else. Anyway, lobbyists say the event has become more of a coveted invitation in the Trump era, As foreign politicians scramble to forge connections with a president who swept into office with few ties to the international community or Washington's hierarchy of established foreign access brokers. So it's a free-for-all now. With its relative lack of diplomatic protocols and press coverage, because you can't pry into religion, even if that's not what's really happening here, it's labeled religion, look away. The prayer breakfast setting is ideal for foreign figures who might not otherwise be able to easily get FaceTime with top American officials because of unsavory reputations or a lack of an official government perch, like you're the deposed president as a former dictator and murderer or something like that, according to lobbyists who help arrange such trips. They also contend that it is easier to secure visas when the breakfast is listed as a destination. That's probably true. Whether it's, look, the word has come down from the boss. Everybody knows you approve any visa that's connected to the National Prayer Breakfast just because, or whether it's no directive has ever been issued. It's just, oh, you're going to the prayer breakfast? I've heard of that thing. It's a famous thing and prayer. And so therefore the American thing to do is to get out of the way. Your visa is approved. Have a great time praying for 4 days. At last year's breakfast, Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, posted a photo on Instagram of himself seated next to Andrei Makarov, a member of the Russian parliament who had pushed for tax breaks for Russians who faced sanctions. That's interesting, right? Like Grassley doesn't know what to do then. Well, tax breaks, that's good. We see common ground. Some people say I like to work with Russians because they also hate LGBTQ folks, and that's great. Some people say it's because we're white, some people because it's fascist. Some people guns, right? My interest is you like to cut taxes. But again, the tax breaks were for Russians who faced sanctions. In other words, who faced sanctions? Oligarchs. Who are oligarchs? The richest Russians. Who got tax breaks? The richest Russians. And now, again, common cultural ties. That's interesting. Not only do I love tax breaks, but I, like you, love tax breaks for the very richest people in my country. Now, the big twist here that Grassley never grasps, I guess, or at least ignores, is why the tax break. The tax break is to pay you back from out of the Russian government's larder here for any economic hit you took for having been sanctioned by the United States of America for doing something terrible that we officially hate. But there's no reason why that should cost you any money, except for the fact that the reason I sanctioned you is because I wanted you to be cost money for your terrible actions. But I'd love to speak to your lobbyist, and why don't we chat a little bit? Even the quickest of meetings, particularly if they are captured in photographs, can help politicians with their domestic political audiences by allowing them to suggest that they either have the support of American leaders or have extracted concessions from them in the meetings, making trips to the breakfast well worth any travel costs or consulting fees to arrange meetings. Right? You pay $220,000, you get the photograph, nothing of substance happened, but you can report in your country, particularly if you're the dictator there. Here's a picture of me and President Trump. Guess what? President Trump, as you know, loves great deals. And the great deal that he's made with us here in Gabon is they're going to buy $75 billion worth of, I've dug myself into a hole. I don't know the chief domestic product for export from Gabon, but I'm sure it's wonderful. And the point is, there's no such contract, and I don't know if Gabon is a dictatorship. I've picked them out because, I don't know, it's an African country, and, there's one there, and we don't know anything about it because we're all ignorant of these things. There are people who know everything there's to know in the audience about Gabon, and they're upset that I've picked on poor Gabon because why? The name of the country sounds funny? You don't think United States of America sounds funny there in Africa? I admit it. It's true. I fall prey to these things. The point is, okay, the president of France could do it, really, honestly, and say that there was a great deal that was made. And the fact that the United States, we don't exist in the same stance of relative mystery vis-a-vis France necessarily, as I do with respect to Gabon. But honestly, if the president of France told his population that Donald Trump had sealed some impossibly stupid deal with him, they would believe it. Not because Emmanuel Macron is some kind of skilled liar necessarily, although maybe he is, but because they know that the American president is a dotard. Anyway, to get back to the real point here, you can leverage that into anything. And so, yes, $220,000 or more is worth the price. The revelations in Ms. Butina's indictment have put organizers of the breakfast, which attracts some 3,800 people from more than 130 countries, on the defensive. Because our focus is on relationships, reconciliation, and unity, even those who may attend with ulterior motives are often moved in a positive and transformative manner. That's a great excuse also. Said A. Larry Ross, spokesman for the Fellowship, the faith-based nonprofit, i.e. the family, that facilitates the organization of the breakfast each year. While we try not to question attendees' motives, we certainly discourage anyone from using the National Prayer Breakfast for personal, financial, or geopolitical gain. Oh, yes, of course. That's what you have to say. Here, by the way, the picture of Yulia Tymoshenko, the Ukrainian opposition leader, and she is indeed the woman with the fantastical blonde braids wrapped around her head. Very interesting. Troubling figure, actually, if you look into her. The congressional co-chairman of the 2019 National Prayer Breakfast, Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, and Senator James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma, praised the gathering as one of the most important annual events in Washington. And it may very well be that they purport to have no idea exactly what goes on there, although clearly they know that it's a lobbying and influence peddling festival. They might not necessarily know all of the unsavory backgrounds of the people who end up there these days. But again, they're provided with cover by the spokesman for the Fellowship here. Look, bad people come to the National Prayer Breakfast, and that's a good thing, because what could be better than getting people who are bad to come in and pray with you? And of course, what would you be praying for? You'd be praying that become better. So it's okay. Well, then what did you talk about? Did you guys pray together about, recognizing human rights in that person's country? Well, prayer is a very personal matter. Oh, yes. So we back off, and the answer is, I don't know anything about it. And Chris Coons, what are you going to do? You're going to say, don't be the congressional co-sponsor or co-chair of the National Prayer Breakfast. It's a corruption fest. It's the swamp that Donald Trump says he's talking about and he's going to drain. You don't want anything to do with this. Are you kidding? Most people, look, 99% of America thinks National Prayer Breakfast, you were the co-chair of that, and you're a upstanding religious fellow. And even if they know what's going on, they're not going to stop doing it, because most people don't know what's going on. It's just, I don't know. It's a sad state of affairs, and this is the sort of place where we cry about those things and then move on. So I think I'm allowed. I'll give you the opportunity to do so if you'll do the same for me. It's unfortunate that some have attended the breakfast in the past for the wrong reasons, they said in a statement to the Times. That would be our national co-chairs, Senator Chris Coons and James Lankford. Again, great cover. Now you have two senators, one from each party, both sides. So it's unassailable. It's really sheer genius. Anyway, they say, nevertheless, we're as committed to ever to ensuring that the 2019 National Prayer Breakfast is a success and follows the tradition of being nonpartisan and unifying, like the Unification Church, the Moons, right? The Moonies. How can you get down on them? Well, they're not real. They're a cult. Oh, yes, I see. Like Islam, right? This is how you get into danger. And it's really quite brilliant. Mr. Lankford serves on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where Ms. Butina reportedly testified in an 8-hour hearing in April. Oh, I know her from the prayer breakfast. What could she be up to, seriously? I mean, honestly, if you meet somebody at the National Prayer Breakfast, don't they have to be of sterling character? This is all trumped up nonsense, he might be likely to think. question is whether Coons is likely to think so. Ms. Butina first attended the breakfast in 2016 before Mr. Trump was elected. She told Yahoo News last year that a meeting had been scheduled between Mr. Trump and Alexander Torshin, the deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank and an ally of President Vladimir Putin, before the event last year, but that the White House had canceled at the last moment. She is also accused in the indictment of trying to arrange a private meeting at last year's breakfast between Trump and Putin. It's not the first time the breakfast has generated controversy in the Trump era. After Ms. Tymoshenko, the Ukrainian opposition leader, scored unscheduled meetings with both Mr. Trump and Vice President Mike Pence at last year's breakfast, she caused a diplomatic stir by telling Washington foreign policy officials that Mr. Trump promised her he would not lift sanctions on Russia until it withdraws from Ukraine. The claims forced the White House to clarify that no formal assurances were given. But the meeting was nevertheless a coup for Ms. Tymoshenko, said Anders Aslund, remember him? I've called his name, an economist who served as an advisor to Ms. Tymoshenko and who remains in contact with her. Yulia always comes here for the prayer breakfast, and it offers the possibility of getting to people she would not otherwise be able to get to, he said. Mr. Slattery, the lobbyist who advised Ms. Tymoshenko to attend, said he has assiduously avoided doing any lobbying around the prayer breakfast. This was just a bizarre happenstance. She happened to be there, and I thought she could benefit from it. Yeah. Leaders and insiders of the fellowship say they hope that shared spirituality around Jesus can help to build bridges of understanding across divides, and that's nice, be they religious, cultural, or political, and cite that mission as a reason controversial guests have been invited in the past. You see? Great cover. The fellowship, for instance, helped facilitate a meeting between President Joseph Kabila of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Mr. Kagame of Rwanda at the breakfast in 2001 before their peace accord the next year. Great thing to point to. We are not naive that people use the prayer breakfast for their own purpose, said Tony P. Hall, a former Democratic congressman from Ohio, who has been close to the fellowship for more than 20 years. We have our own purposes, too. You can't just invite wonderful, exciting, great people, said Mr. Hall. Jesus, when he went to dinner with everybody. So international criminals, human rights violators, whatever, these are the people. Yeah, okay, that's true. I appreciate the point. Is Jesus going to be there? No, but his nearest acolytes in the world as it currently exists will be. Now, they have total opposite agenda, but hey, the point is Jesus' name has been evoked. Jesus was able to sit down with the worst people, apparently, and have a serious effect on their outlook on life. Are you saying you're Jesus, or you can do just as well? Well, no, of course not. And my own poor imitation of Jesus, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, it's good cover, and if you know how to plead the case, you can get away with almost anything. It's really quite fascinating. And this all may just mean that we have to take a longer look once again back at the writings of Jeff Charlotte and others about the family and the fellowship and the number of times that these guys have gotten themselves in trouble of weird kinds, almost Bigfoot type kinds in the past. And then we tend to forget about them. I mean, all of what happened with John Ensign, for instance, was all, happening inside the family and the fellowship. Right? And even in the C Street townhouse that they own, which I imagine is not that far from the Breitbart Embassy, the fake home of Steve Bannon, et cetera, et cetera. There's an awful lot to be untangled here, and I guess maybe we ought to dive back into it. But for whatever reason, in between the Ensign thing and the unraveling of the National Prayer Breakfast thing, we've forgotten that the family and the fellowship keeps popping up in weird places and in weird ways. And, I guess the fact that they're able to have senators and congressmen and former congressmen who lobby with them to vouch for the operation gives great cover, too. But then again, members of Congress have found themselves photographed and hooked up and in weird, strange-looking situations captured by photographs with, again, the Unification Church. and the Moonies. So, I mean, that's no guarantee that anything is on the up and up, having been photographed with Congress people. I mean, really out there in the diners and bars in real America, I don't think anybody thinks being photographed with a congressman is a good thing in any way, shape, or form. All right. Anyway, lots of stuff we read into the record that comes from the background, and so you'll need to catch up on the day's news. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next, and Justice Putnam will get you caught up. What's he got on tabs here? Let's see. U.S. election security is hindered by a lack of leadership at the top from Donald Trump. Maybe on purpose. Maybe. The Trump Health Office lies to millions with fake reports and data in the continuing effort to undermine Obamacare. No surprise there.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waltman.
Thanks for listening. Much more here, too. The Agriculture Secretary admits Trump's farm bailouts won't cover the losses from Trump's trade war, and Trump tells the American military to surrender large swaths of Afghanistan as the U.S. negotiates directly with the Taliban. I bet you didn't see that coming. I don't think that was supposed to be on the agenda. Much more, too. Hang on.